The world changed forever on July 28, 1914. It was the day that marked the beginning of one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. The Great War, later known as World War I, would claim millions of lives, redraw borders, and set the stage for even greater conflicts to come. But how did it all begin? And what were the key moments that shaped the war? Buckle up as we take you through the entire history of World War I, told like never before. Our story begins in the early 20th century. Europe was a continent teetering on the edge of monumental change. The streets of cities like Paris, Berlin, and Vienna were bustling with life, yet beneath the surface tensions simmered. The early 1900s were marked by rapid industrialization, which brought both progress and competition. Factories with towering smokestacks dotted the landscape, symbolizing the relentless march of progress. But this progress came at a cost. The race for industrial supremacy fueled rivalries among the great powers of Europe. Europe was a continent on edge. The public, aware of the growing tensions, often gathered in large, tense crowds. Nationalism was on the rise, and the idea of national superiority began to take root in the hearts and minds of many. Military parades became common sights, showcasing the might of each nation's armed forces. The people watched with a mix of pride and apprehension, knowing that these displays of power were not just for show. Industrialization had fueled competition, rival empires sought power, and nationalism was at an all-time high. The factories, with their endless production lines, were not just creating goods, they were creating a sense of urgency and competition. Each nation wanted to outdo the other, not just in terms of economic output, but also in military might. Nationalistic rallies were held where leaders would speak of the greatness of their nation and the need to assert their dominance on the world stage. These rallies stirred the hearts of the people, filling them with a sense of purpose and destiny. The world was divided into two major camps: the Triple Entente, comprising France, Russia, and Britain, and the Triple Alliance, made up of Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. These alliances were meant to provide security, but they also created a fragile balance of power. Each side was wary of the other, knowing that any conflict could quickly escalate. The soldiers of these nations trained rigorously, preparing for a war that many hoped would never come. The maps of Europe were studied carefully as each side planned their strategies and contingencies. Then, on June 28, 1914, the spark that lit the fire, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary, was assassinated in Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist. This event sent shockwaves throughout Europe. Franz Ferdinand was not just a political figure, he was a symbol of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. His assassination was seen as an attack on the very heart of the empire. The streets of Sarajevo, once bustling with life, were now filled with tension and fear. The news of his death spread quickly, and the reactions were immediate and intense. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. This declaration was not just a response to the assassination, it was a statement of intent. Austria-Hungary wanted to assert its dominance and send a clear message to any who would challenge its authority. The military was mobilized and soldiers prepared for battle. The streets were filled with the sounds of marching boots and the clatter of weapons. The people watched in silence, knowing that this was just the beginning. But what started as a regional conflict quickly spiraled out of control as the web of alliances pulled in more nations. The declaration of war by Austria-Hungary set off a chain reaction. Russia, bound by its alliance with Serbia, began to mobilize its forces. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, saw this as a threat and declared war on Russia. France, allied with Russia, was then drawn into the conflict. The web of alliances meant to provide security now ensured that the conflict would spread. The mobilization of armies was swift and efficient. Trains carried soldiers to the front lines, and the air was filled with the sounds of preparation for war. By August 4th, 1914, Europe was at war. The newspapers were filled with headlines declaring the outbreak of war. The people who had watched the tensions build now faced the reality of conflict. The battlefronts were established and soldiers marched off to fight. The mood was a mix of determination and dread. Many believed that the war would be over quickly, but others feared the worst. The reality of war was harsh and unforgiving. The soldiers, filled with a sense of duty, prepared to face the unknown. The Great War had begun, changing the world forever. The battlefields of Europe became scenes of unimaginable horror. Trenches were dug, and soldiers lived in constant fear of attack. The sounds of gunfire and explosions filled the air. The war, which many had hoped would be over quickly, dragged on, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The world would never be the same. The Great War, later known as World War I, reshaped nations, altered borders, and changed the course of history. The road to war had been long and complex, but its impact was immediate and profound. Germany had a plan, the Schlieffen Plan. This strategy was meticulously crafted by General Count Alfred von Schlieffen in 1905, long before the war began. The plan was designed to address Germany's precarious position, sandwiched between two powerful adversaries, France to the west and Russia to the east. Schlieffen's idea was to avoid a prolonged two-front war, which would stretch German resources and manpower to the breaking point. Instead, the plan called for a rapid, decisive victory in the west, followed by a swift redeployment of forces to the Eastern Front. The key to this strategy was speed and surprise, aiming to knock France out of the war within 6 weeks. Their goal? To avoid a two-front war by swiftly defeating France in the west before turning to Russia in the east. The plan involved a massive right-wing sweep through Belgium, bypassing the heavily fortified Franco-German border. This would allow German forces to encircle Paris and force a French surrender. The German High Command believed that once France was out of the picture, they could then focus their full military might on the slower mobilizing Russian forces. The Schlieffen Plan was bold and ambitious, relying on precise timing and flawless execution. However, it also carried significant risks, particularly the violation of Belgian neutrality, which would inevitably draw Britain into the conflict. But things didn't go as planned. The Battle of the Marne halted the German advance, marking a significant turning point in the early stages of the war. The French and British forces, under the command of General Joseph Joffre, managed to regroup and launch a counter-offensive along the Marne River. This unexpected resistance caught the Germans off guard, forcing them to retreat and abandon their rapid advance towards Paris. The failure of the Schlieffen Plan shattered German hopes for a quick victory and set the stage for a prolonged and grueling conflict. The Battle of the Marne demonstrated the resilience and determination of the Allied forces, who were now fully committed to stopping the German onslaught, and soon both sides found themselves stuck in a deadly stalemate. The Western Front became a vast network of trenches stretching from the North Sea to the Swiss border. These trenches were separated by a desolate expanse known as No Man's Land, a killing field riddled with barbed wire, landmines, and the remnants of failed offensives. The initial mobility of the war gave way to a static attritional struggle, where gaining even a few yards of ground could cost thousands of lives. The soldiers on both sides dug in, creating elaborate trench systems that would become their homes and battlegrounds for the next 4 years. Thus began the age of trench warfare, muddy, brutal, and horrifying. Life in the trenches was a daily ordeal of survival, with soldiers facing constant threats from enemy fire, artillery bombardments, and gas attacks. The trenches themselves were often waterlogged and infested with rats, lice, and disease. Soldiers had to contend with the ever-present danger of trench foot, a painful condition caused by prolonged exposure to damp and unsanitary conditions. The psychological toll of trench warfare was immense, as men lived in a state of perpetual fear and anxiety, knowing that death could come at any moment from a sniper's bullet or a sudden artillery barrage. Soldiers lived in trenches for months, battling not only the enemy but also disease, hunger, and the terror of constant shellfire. The monotony of trench life was punctuated by moments of sheer terror during attacks and counterattacks. Soldiers had to endure the deafening noise of artillery shells exploding around them, the acrid smell of gunpowder, and the sight of their comrades falling in battle. Medical personnel worked tirelessly to treat the wounded and prevent the spread of infections, but the conditions made their job incredibly difficult. Despite the hardships, soldiers developed a sense of camaraderie and resilience, forming bonds that would last a lifetime. The invention of the machine gun made open-field attacks suicidal. These weapons could fire hundreds of rounds per minute, mowing down advancing troops with devastating efficiency. The machine gun's deadly effectiveness forced both sides to adopt new tactics and strategies, leading to the development of trench warfare as a means of protection. The once glorious image of cavalry charges and bayonet assaults was replaced by the grim reality of machine gun nests and barbed wire entanglements. The war had become a brutal contest of firepower and endurance, with each side trying to outlast the other in a deadly game of attrition. The war turned into a bloody game of attrition, lasting far longer than anyone had anticipated. The initial optimism and enthusiasm that had greeted the outbreak of war quickly faded as the true horrors of the conflict became apparent. The Western Front became a landscape of devastation, with entire towns and villages reduced to rubble. The human cost was staggering, with millions of soldiers and civilians losing their lives. The war's prolonged duration and immense suffering left a lasting impact on those who lived through it, shaping the course of history and altering the world in ways that are still felt today. World War I wasn't just fought in Europe. The conflict spread far beyond the trenches of the Western Front, reaching into the far corners of the globe. This was a truly global war, involving nations and territories from every continent. The battles and skirmishes that took place outside of Europe were just as significant and brutal as those on the European front lines. The conflict spread to Africa, the Middle East, and even the Pacific. In Africa, colonial powers clashed in a series of brutal campaigns. The Middle East saw the Ottoman Empire fighting on multiple fronts, while in the Pacific, Japan seized German territories. Each of these regions had its own unique challenges and horrors, contributing to the overall devastation of the war. The Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers, bringing the war to the Middle East. The Ottomans fought against the British and their allies in a series of grueling campaigns. The Gallipoli campaign, for instance, was a bloody and protracted battle that resulted in heavy casualties on both sides. The Ottoman Empire's involvement in the war had far-reaching consequences, leading to significant political and social changes in the region, while Japan aligned with the Allies. Japan saw the war as an opportunity to expand its influence in Asia and the Pacific. They quickly moved to seize German-held territories, including the vital port of Tsingtao in China. Japan's participation in the war marked a significant shift in the balance of power in the region and set the stage for future conflicts. British and French forces clashed with German colonial troops in Africa. The African campaigns were marked by harsh conditions and brutal fighting. Soldiers had to contend with not only the enemy, but also the harsh environment, disease, and supply shortages. The war in Africa was a grueling and often overlooked aspect of World War I, but it played a crucial role in the overall conflict. Meanwhile, in the Atlantic, German U-boats hunted Allied supply ships. The U-boat campaign was a critical part of Germany's strategy to cut off supplies to Britain and its allies. These stealthy submarines prowled the Atlantic, sinking merchant ships and causing significant losses. The threat of U-boat attacks created a constant state of tension and fear among Allied sailors, and had a profound impact on the course of the war. One such attack would change the course of history. The sinking of the Lusitania, a British ocean liner, by a German U-boat in 1915 was a turning point in the war. The attack resulted in the deaths of over 1,000 civilians, including many Americans, and caused outrage around the world. The sinking of the Lusitania highlighted the brutal nature of unrestricted submarine warfare and brought the war closer to home for many people. In 1915, a German U-boat torpedoed the British liner Lusitania, killing over 1,000 civilians, including Americans. The attack was a shocking and tragic event that had a profound impact on public opinion. It galvanized support for the Allied cause and increased pressure on the United States to join the war. The sinking of the Lusitania was a stark reminder of the war's far-reaching consequences and the human cost of the conflict, killing over 1,000 civilians, including Americans. The loss of so many innocent lives was a turning point in the war. It brought the reality of the conflict home to people around the world and underscored the need for a resolution. The sinking of the Lusitania was a catalyst for change, leading to increased support for the war effort and ultimately contributing to the United States' decision to enter the conflict. This act, combined with unrestricted submarine warfare, would later push the United States toward war. The US had tried to remain neutral, but the continued attacks on its ships and citizens made it increasingly difficult to stay out of the conflict. The unrestricted submarine warfare campaign by Germany was seen as a direct threat to American interests and security. The US government faced mounting pressure to take action and protect its people and allies. By 1917, American troops were on their way to Europe, ready to join the fight. The entry of the United States into the war marked a significant turning point. American soldiers, known as doughboys, brought fresh energy and resources to the weary Allied forces. Their arrival boosted morale and helped to tip the balance in favor of the Allies. The involvement of the United States in World War I was a decisive factor in the eventual victory and reshaped the global order for years to come. For the first few years, the United States remained neutral. But in 1917, two events changed everything. First, Germany resumed unrestricted submarine warfare, attacking American ships. Then the infamous Zimmermann telegram, a German proposal to Mexico to attack the United States, was intercepted. The public was outraged. On April 6, 1917, President Woodrow Wilson addressed Congress. The United States was going to war. The arrival of fresh American troops, known as the Doughboys, boosted the morale of the exhausted Allies. The war was about to take a decisive turn. America's entry into the war marked a significant shift in the conflict. By 1918, the tide was turning. Advances in military technology, including tanks and aircraft, gave the Allies a crucial edge. The 100 Days Offensive saw a series of decisive victories. The German army, once formidable, was crumbling under pressure. At home, food shortages and civil unrest weakened German resolve. On November 9, 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated. Just 2 days later, on November 11th at 11 a.m., the guns fell silent. The war was over. Celebrations erupted worldwide, marking the end of a devastating conflict. In 1919, the Treaty of Versailles officially ended the war, but its harsh terms left Germany humiliated and economically crippled. Millions of lives had been lost, and entire empires had collapsed. The Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires ceased to exist. A new world order was emerging, but one thing was certain: the scars of war would not fade easily. Cities lay in ruins, and the world faced a long road to recovery. Before the world was engulfed in the flames of World War I, the political climate in Europe was a complex web of alliances, rivalries, and national ambitions. The early 20th century saw Europe dominated by powerful empires and kingdoms, each vying for influence and control. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, with its diverse ethnic groups, struggled to maintain unity. Nationalist movements within the empire sought greater autonomy or outright independence, creating internal tensions. Meanwhile, the Ottoman Empire, often referred to as the sick man of Europe, was in decline, losing territories and facing internal strife. Germany, unified in 1871, was rapidly becoming a major industrial and military power. Under Kaiser Wilhelm II, Germany sought to assert itself on the world stage, leading to increased tensions with its neighbours. France, still smarting from its defeat in the Franco-Prussian War, viewed Germany with suspicion and sought alliances to counterbalance its growing power. Britain, with its vast global empire, aimed to maintain its naval supremacy and protect its colonies. Russia, a sprawling empire with vast resources, had its own ambitions in the Balkans and sought to protect Slavic nations under Austro-Hungarian rule. The intricate system of alliances, such as the Triple Entente between France, Russia and Britain, and the Triple Alliance between Germany, Austria-Hungary and Italy, meant that any regional conflict had the potential to escalate into a full-scale war. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914 was the spark that ignited these volatile elements, leading to a conflict of unprecedented scale. Understanding the political climate before World War I is crucial to grasping how a single event could trigger such a catastrophic chain reaction. The ambitions, fears and rivalries of Europe's great powers set the stage for a war that would change the course of history forever. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary on June 28, 1914, is often cited as the immediate catalyst for World War I. The Archduke, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was visiting Sarajevo in Bosnia, a region annexed by Austria-Hungary in 1908, much to the dismay of Serbian nationalists. On that fateful day, the Archduke and his wife, Sophie, were travelling in an open car through the streets of Sarajevo. A group of assassins from the nationalist group known as the Black Hand had plotted to kill him, believing that his death would further their cause for Serbian independence. The first attempt on the Archduke's life came when a bomb was thrown at his car, but it bounced off the folded-down convertible top and exploded behind them, injuring members of the entourage. Despite this close call, Franz Ferdinand insisted on continuing with the day's planned activities. Later, as they travelled to visit the injured at the hospital, their driver took a wrong turn. This mistake brought them directly in front of Gavrilo Princip, one of the Black Hand conspirators. Seizing the opportunity, Princip fired 2 shots, fatally wounding both the Archduke and his wife. The immediate aftermath of the assassination was chaotic. Within hours, news of the assassination spread, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire was thrown into turmoil. The assassination gave Austria-Hungary the pretext it needed to take a hard line against Serbia, whom they blamed for the attack. Within weeks, a series of diplomatic maneuvers and ultimatums ensued. Austria-Hungary, with the backing of Germany, issued an ultimatum to Serbia, demanding harsh terms that were almost impossible to meet. When Serbia's response was deemed unsatisfactory, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia on July 28, 1914, exactly 1 month after the assassination. This declaration set off a chain reaction of alliances being called into play. Russia mobilized to support Serbia, prompting Germany to declare war on Russia. France, allied with Russia, was drawn in, and soon after Germany invaded Belgium, bringing Britain into the war. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand thus triggered a series of events that led to the full-scale eruption of World War I. Understanding this pivotal moment helps us grasp how a single act of violence can unleash a torrent of geopolitical consequences. The assassination didn't just end 2 lives, it shattered the fragile peace of an entire continent and plunged the world into a devastating conflict. As the world braced for a war of unprecedented scale, the early battles and strategies set the tone for the years of conflict that followed. In the initial stages, both the Allied powers and the Central Powers were optimistic, believing that the war would be short-lived. However, they soon realized that this would be a protracted and brutal struggle. The Germans, under the Schlieffen Plan, aimed to quickly defeat France by sweeping through Belgium and then redirecting their forces to the Eastern Front against Russia. This plan hinged on rapid movement and decisive victories, but it encountered significant obstacles. The Belgian resistance was fiercer than anticipated, and the British Expeditionary Force joined the fray, further complicating German advances. The Battle of the Marne in September 1914 marked a significant turning point. French and British forces managed to halt the German advance just outside Paris, leading to a stalemate and the establishment of entrenched positions. This battle effectively ended the German hopes of a quick victory in the west. On the Eastern Front, the Russians mobilized faster than expected, launching offensives into East Prussia and Galicia. The Germans, under Generals Hindenburg and Ludendorff, managed to encircle and annihilate Russian forces at the Battle of Tannenberg, a significant victory that boosted German morale. However, the vastness of the Eastern Front meant that a decisive victory was elusive. In the west, both sides dug in, creating a continuous line of trenches stretching from the Swiss border to the North Sea. This trench warfare defined much of World War I, characterized by brutal conditions, high casualties, and little territorial gain. The early battles revealed the devastating power of modern weaponry, including machine guns, artillery, and poison gas. Traditional strategies and tactics quickly proved obsolete in the face of industrialized warfare. The early phase of the war also saw significant naval battles. The British Royal Navy imposed a blockade on Germany, aiming to cut off supplies and weaken the German war effort. In response, Germany launched unrestricted submarine warfare, targeting Allied and neutral shipping. This maritime struggle would have far-reaching implications, particularly in drawing the United States into the conflict. As the war dragged on, it became clear that a war of attrition was unfolding. Both sides sought to wear down the other through sustained offensives and economic blockades. The early battles and strategies highlighted the brutal reality of World War I, a conflict marked by immense human suffering and strategic stalemates. Understanding these early battles and strategies provides crucial insight into how World War I evolved into a prolonged and devastating conflict. It also underscores the importance of adaptability and innovation in the face of unprecedented challenges. The lessons learned in these early years would shape military thinking for generations to come. As World War I raged on, it became a proving ground for technological advancements that would change the face of warfare forever. The industrial age had equipped nations with the means to produce weapons on a scale never seen before, and the battlefield became a brutal testing ground for these innovations. One of the most significant advancements was the machine gun. Capable of firing hundreds of rounds per minute, machine guns transformed combat, making traditional charges across open ground suicidal. Soldiers were forced to dig in, leading to the infamous trench warfare that defined much of the conflict. Artillery also saw dramatic improvements. Long-range cannons and howitzers could deliver devastating barrages capable of obliterating enemy positions from miles away. The introduction of creeping barrages, a tactic where artillery fire moved forward in stages just ahead of the advancing infantry, sought to break the stalemate of trench warfare. Poison gas, first used by the Germans at the Second Battle of Ypres in 1915, added a new horrifying dimension to the war. Chlorine, phosgene, and mustard gas caused agonizing injuries and deaths, forcing the development of gas masks and protective gear. The terror of gas attacks lingered in soldiers' minds, adding to the psychological toll of the war. The skies, too, became a new battlefield. Airplanes, initially used for reconnaissance, soon took on more aggressive roles. Dogfights between fighter planes became common, and strategic bombing raids targeted enemy infrastructure and civilian areas. The war also saw the first use of tanks, introduced by the British at the Battle of the Somme in 1916. These armored vehicles were designed to cross no man's land and break through enemy defenses, although early models were slow and prone to mechanical failure. Naval warfare was transformed by the use of submarines. German U-boats prowled the seas, sinking Allied and neutral ships in an attempt to cut off supplies to Britain. This unrestricted submarine warfare would eventually draw the United States into the conflict, tipping the balance in favor of the Allies. Communication advancements played a crucial role as well. The use of wireless radios and field telephones allowed for better coordination of troop movements and artillery strikes. However, the interception and decryption of enemy communications also became a strategic priority, leading to the development of cryptography and code-breaking techniques. These technological advancements not only shaped the tactics and strategies of World War I, but also set the stage for future conflicts. The brutal efficiency of industrialized warfare highlighted the need for new approaches to conflict resolution and international diplomacy. In understanding the technological innovations of World War I, we gain insight into the relentless pace of human ingenuity, even in the face of immense suffering. These advancements, born out of necessity and desperation, would leave a lasting legacy on the art of war and the course of history itself. As the men marched off to the front lines, the role of women and civilians became crucial in supporting the war effort. The war not only transformed the battlefield, but also redefined societal roles and expectations, particularly for women. Women stepped into roles traditionally held by men, taking on jobs in factories, offices and farms. In munitions factories, they worked long hours under hazardous conditions, producing the weapons and ammunition essential for the war. Known as munitionettes, these women faced the constant threat of explosions and exposure to toxic chemicals which caused severe health issues. On the home front, women also served as nurses, caregivers and volunteers. Organizations like the Red Cross mobilized thousands of women to provide medical care to wounded soldiers, both at home and near the front lines. The bravery and dedication of these nurses, often working in makeshift hospitals under fire, saved countless lives and provided comfort to those in their darkest hours. Civilians, too, played a significant role in sustaining the war effort. With food shortages becoming a critical issue, people were encouraged to grow their own food in victory gardens. Rationing became a part of daily life, with citizens sacrificing personal comforts to ensure that soldiers had enough supplies. The war also spurred significant social and political changes. The contributions of women to the war effort helped to accelerate the women's suffrage movement. In many countries, including the United States and the United Kingdom, women gained the right to vote shortly after the war ended, recognizing their invaluable contributions to society. Propaganda became a powerful tool to maintain morale and support for the war. Governments used posters, films and speeches to encourage enlistment, promote war bonds, and rally the public behind the war effort. These messages often portrayed the conflict as a just and noble cause, appealing to patriotism and duty. However, the war also brought immense suffering to civilians. In occupied territories, people faced harsh conditions, forced labor and violence. The war's devastation led to widespread displacement, with millions becoming refugees. The Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 further compounded the suffering, claiming more lives than the war itself. Despite the hardships, the resilience and determination of women and civilians were instrumental in sustaining the war effort. Their contributions, often overlooked in the grand narratives of battle, were vital to the eventual Allied victory. The war not only reshaped the geopolitical landscape, but also laid the groundwork for significant social transformations. In recognizing the role of women and civilians during World War I, we honor their sacrifices and acknowledge the profound impact they had on both the war and the world that emerged from it. Their stories remind us that the front lines of conflict extend far beyond the battlefield, encompassing the homes, factories, and hearts of those who support the fight. The World War I was marked by numerous key battles and turning points that shaped the course of the conflict and determined its eventual outcome. These battles were not just clashes of armies, but pivotal moments that influenced the strategies, morale, and direction of the war. One of the earliest significant battles was the First Battle of the Marne in September 1914. This battle halted the German advance into France and ended their hopes for a quick victory. The Allied forces, primarily French and British, managed to push back the Germans, leading to a prolonged and grueling trench warfare that would come to define the Western Front. In 1916, the Battle of Verdun became one of the longest and most brutal battles in the war. Lasting from February to December, it was a symbol of French determination and endurance. The Germans aimed to bleed France white by inflicting maximum casualties, but the French, under General Philippe Pétain, held their ground. Verdun became a rallying point for the French, with the phrase, "They shall not pass," epitomizing their resolve. The Battle of the Somme, also in 1916, was another major turning point. Launched by the British to relieve pressure on the French at Verdun, it saw some of the heaviest casualties of the war. On the first day alone, the British suffered over 57,000 casualties. Despite the high human cost, the battle introduced new tactics and technologies, including the first use of tanks in warfare. In the east, the Brusilov offensive in 1916 marked a significant Russian victory against the Austro-Hungarian forces. Led by General Alexei Brusilov, the offensive inflicted severe losses on the Central Powers and showcased the potential of coordinated artillery and infantry assaults. However, the Russian gains were short-lived as internal turmoil and logistical challenges plagued their war effort. The entry of the United States into the war in 1917 marked a crucial turning point. The American Expeditionary Forces, led by General John J. Pershing, provided fresh troops and resources, bolstering the weary Allied armies. The Battle of Cantigny in May 1918 was the first major American offensive, demonstrating their growing role in the conflict and boosting Allied morale. The final series of battles, known as the 100 Days Offensive, began in August 1918. This coordinated Allied effort involving French, British and American forces pushed the Germans back and broke their defensive lines. Key battles such as the Battle of Amiens and the Meuse-Argonne offensive were instrumental in hastening the end of the war. Throughout the war, naval battles also played a crucial role. The Battle of Jutland in 1916 was the largest naval battle and saw the British Royal Navy clash with the German High Seas Fleet. While tactically inconclusive, it reinforced British naval dominance and the effectiveness of the blockade that starved Germany of vital resources. These major turning points and key battles were not just military engagements, but moments that defined the resilience, strategy and eventual fate of the warring nations. They highlight the immense human cost and the strategic maneuvers that shaped the course of World War I. As we reflect on these battles, we remember the bravery and sacrifices of those who fought and the profound impact these events had on the world. The lessons learned from these turning points continue to resonate, reminding us of the complexities and consequences of global conflict. The end of World War I was marked by a series of events that culminated in the signing of the Armistice on November 11, 1918. The final months of the war, often referred to as the 100 Days Offensive, saw the Allied forces launching a relentless series of attacks on the exhausted and demoralized German troops. This period was characterized by significant advances, with key battles such as the Battle of Amiens in August 1918, which was described by German General Erich Ludendorff as the Black Day of the German Army. The relentless pressure from the Allied forces, combined with the internal strife and economic collapse within Germany, led to a rapid deterioration of the Central Powers' military position. By October 1918, the German High Command recognized that the war was unwinnable. Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated the throne on November 9, 1918. fleeing into exile in the Netherlands, which further destabilized the German government. In the early hours of November 11, 1918, representatives from the Allied forces and Germany met in a railway carriage in the forest of Compiègne in France to negotiate an armistice. The terms were harsh and aimed at preventing any possibility of Germany resuming hostilities. The German delegation, led by Matthias Erzberger, had little choice but to accept the terms dictated by the Allies. At 5:00 a.m., the armistice agreement was signed, and it came into effect at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The news of the ceasefire spread quickly, and scenes of jubilation erupted in cities across the Allied nations. Soldiers, weary from years of brutal combat, could finally lay down their arms and look forward to returning home. However, the end of the fighting did not mean an immediate return to peace. The aftermath of the war saw the dismantling of empires, redrawing of national boundaries, and significant political upheaval. The Treaty of Versailles, signed on June 28, 1919, formally ended the state of war between Germany and the Allied powers. The treaty imposed severe reparations and territorial losses on Germany, sowing the seeds of resentment that would later contribute to the rise of Adolf Hitler and the outbreak of World War II. The signing of the Armistice on November 11, 1918, remains a poignant moment in history, symbolizing both the end of a devastating conflict and the beginning of a complex and turbulent peace process. As we remember this moment, we honor the sacrifices of those who fought and reflect on the lessons learned from the Great War. The echoes of their struggle continue to remind us of the importance of striving for lasting peace and understanding in our world. The Treaty of Versailles, signed on June 28, 1919, in the opulent Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, was the most significant of the peace treaties that brought World War I to an official end. The treaty's terms were harsh and aimed primarily at punishing Germany for its role in the conflict. The Allied powers, led by the Big Four, Woodrow Wilson of the United States, David Lloyd George of Britain, Georges Clemenceau of France, and Vittorio Orlando of Italy, imposed severe reparations and territorial losses on Germany. Germany was forced to cede territories such as Alsace-Lorraine to France, Eupen-Malmedy to Belgium, and significant parts of Prussia to the newly formed Poland. The Saar Basin was placed under the administration of the League of Nations, and the city of Danzig was declared a free city. The treaty also mandated the demilitarization of the Rhineland and imposed strict limitations on the size and capabilities of the German military. Perhaps most controversially, the treaty included the War Guilt Clause, which placed full responsibility for the war on Germany and its allies, thereby justifying the reparations. The economic implications of the Treaty of Versailles were profound. Germany was required to pay reparations amounting to 132 billion gold marks, a sum that crippled its economy and led to hyperinflation. The social and political consequences within Germany were equally severe. The treaty fueled widespread resentment and a sense of humiliation among the German people, sentiments that were skillfully exploited by Adolf Hitler in his rise to power. The Treaty of Versailles also had significant geopolitical repercussions. The dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire led to the creation of several new nations in Europe and the Middle East, redrawing the map in ways that would sow seeds of future conflicts. The harsh terms of the treaty are often cited as a major contributing factor to the outbreak of World War II, as they fostered an environment of economic hardship and political instability in Germany, ultimately leading to the rise of the Nazi regime. Despite its intention to secure a lasting peace, the Treaty of Versailles is now widely regarded as a flawed document that failed to address the underlying issues that had led to the Great War. The League of Nations, established as part of the treaty to promote international cooperation and peace, lacked the authority and the participation of key nations like the United States, rendering it ineffective in preventing future conflicts. In retrospect, the Treaty of Versailles serves as a poignant reminder of the complexities of peace-building and the dangers of punitive measures in international diplomacy. The lessons learned from its failures continue to inform contemporary approaches to conflict resolution and post-war reconstruction. As we reflect on the Treaty of Versailles, we are reminded of the importance of striving for a fair and just peace, one that addresses the root causes of conflict and fosters reconciliation rather than resentment. Only by learning from the past can we hope to build a more stable and peaceful future. The end of World War I marked not just the cessation of hostilities, but the beginning of a new era in global politics. The war's aftermath brought about significant changes that would influence international relations for decades to come. One of the most immediate consequences was the shift in power dynamics. The old empires, Russia, Germany, Austro-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, collapsed, making way for new nations and political ideologies. The Russian Revolution of 1917 led to the establishment of the Soviet Union, which would become a superpower and a central player in global politics throughout the 20th century. The League of Nations, despite its shortcomings, laid the groundwork for future international organizations aimed at fostering global cooperation. Its failure highlighted the necessity for a more robust system, eventually leading to the creation of the United Nations after World War II. The principle of collective security and the idea of a global community working together to prevent conflicts were born out of the lessons learned from the League's inefficacies. World War I also had a profound impact on colonial empires. The war effort had strained the resources of European powers, leading to a weakening of their control over colonies. This set the stage for independence movements across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. The mandates system, established by the League of Nations, redistributed former Ottoman and German colonies, but also sowed the seeds of future conflicts, particularly in the Middle East. Economically, the war had devastating effects. The financial strain of reparations and the Great Depression of the 1930s created a volatile environment that facilitated the rise of totalitarian regimes in Germany, Italy, and Japan. The economic instability and the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles contributed directly to the outbreak of World War II, as nations sought to rectify the perceived injustices of the post-war settlement. The psychological impact of the war was equally significant. The disillusionment and trauma experienced by soldiers and civilians alike led to a questioning of traditional values and a sense of cynicism that permeated the interwar years. This period saw the rise of new cultural and intellectual movements, including modernism in art and literature, which reflected the fractured and uncertain world left in the wake of the Great War. The geopolitical landscape of the 20th century was undeniably shaped by the events and outcomes of World War I. The alliances formed, the treaties signed, and the new ideologies that emerged all played crucial roles in shaping the global order. The war's legacy is a testament to the far-reaching consequences of conflict and the importance of striving for a just and lasting peace. As we look back on World War I, we are reminded of the intricate web of causes and effects that define global politics. The lessons learned from this devastating conflict continue to resonate today, reminding us of the importance of diplomacy, cooperation, and the pursuit of peace in an ever-changing world. World War I was not only a military and political watershed, but also a profound cultural and social turning point. The war's impact on society was far-reaching, affecting every aspect of life and leaving an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of the world. The sheer scale of the conflict and the staggering loss of life led to widespread disillusionment. The optimism and idealism that characterized the pre-war era were replaced by a sense of cynicism and despair. This shift was poignantly captured in the works of poets and writers such as Wilfred Owen, Siegfried Sassoon, and Erich Maria Remarque, whose Vivid depictions of the horrors of war resonated with a generation scarred by the experience. In art and literature, the trauma of the war gave rise to modernism, a movement characterized by a break with traditional forms and the exploration of new, often fragmented perspectives. Artists like Pablo Picasso and Marcel Duchamp shattered conventional aesthetics, while authors like James Joyce and Virginia Woolf experimented with stream-of-consciousness narratives reflecting the fractured reality of the post-war world. The war also had a significant impact on gender roles and the status of women. With millions of men conscripted to the front lines, women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers, taking on roles that had previously been considered the domain of men. This shift not only challenged traditional gender norms, but also laid the groundwork for future social change. The contributions of women during the war were a catalyst for the suffrage movement, leading to the granting of voting rights to women in several countries, including the United Kingdom and the United States. The psychological toll of the war was immense. Shell shock, now recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD), emerged as a significant issue for returning soldiers. The mental health crisis prompted advances in psychiatric care and a deeper understanding of the psychological effects of combat, though it would take decades for these insights to be fully integrated into medical practice. Socially, the war accelerated changes in class structures. The shared experience of the trenches blurred the lines between different social classes, fostering a sense of camaraderie and mutual respect. However, the post-war period also saw significant social unrest as returning soldiers faced economic hardship and unemployment. The disparity between the sacrifices made during the war and the harsh realities of peacetime life fueled labor strikes and demands for better working conditions and social reforms. The cultural and social impact of World War I extended beyond the immediate post-war years. The war's legacy influenced subsequent generations, shaping attitudes towards conflict, authority, and social justice. The lessons learned from this devastating period continue to resonate, reminding us of the profound and lasting effects of war on society and culture. As we reflect on the cultural and social impact of World War I, we are reminded of the resilience of the human spirit and the capacity for change and renewal in the face of adversity. The war may have shattered the old world, but it also paved the way for new ideas, movements, and possibilities, leaving a complex and enduring legacy. World War I, often referred to as the Great War, left an indelible mark on the collective memory of nations around the globe. In the aftermath of the conflict, societies sought ways to honor the millions who had perished, and to ensure that the lessons of the war were never forgotten. This led to the establishment of numerous memorials and traditions of remembrance that continue to this day. One of the most iconic symbols of World War I remembrance is the poppy. Inspired by the poem In Flanders Fields by Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, the poppy became a symbol of the bloodshed and sacrifice of the war. Each year on November 11th, people in many countries wear poppies to commemorate Armistice Day, now known as Remembrance Day or Veterans Day. Memorials dedicated to World War I can be found in nearly every country that participated in the conflict. In France, the Thiepval Memorial honors the missing of the Battle of the Somme, bearing the names of over 72,000 British and South African soldiers who have no known grave. Similarly, the Menin Gate Memorial in Ypres, Belgium, lists the names of more than 54,000 Commonwealth soldiers who went missing in the Ypres salient. In the United States, the National World War I Memorial in Washington, D.C. serves as a tribute to the American soldiers who fought and died in the war. This memorial, along with the Liberty Memorial in Kansas City, Missouri, stands as a testament to the bravery and sacrifice of the American Expeditionary Forces. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission, CWGC, plays a crucial role in preserving the memory of those who died in the war. Established in 1917, the CWGC is responsible for the care and maintenance of war graves and memorials in over 150 countries. Their work ensures that the fallen are remembered with dignity and respect. In addition to physical memorials, various traditions have emerged to honor the memory of World War I. The 2-minute silence observed at 11 a.m. on November 11th is a poignant moment of reflection and respect for those who lost their lives. Ceremonies at the Cenotaph in London and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington National Cemetery are solemn reminders of the cost of war. Educational initiatives also play a vital role in keeping the memory of World War I alive. Museums such as the Imperial War Museum in London and the National World War I Museum in Kansas City provide valuable insights into the war's history and its impact on the world. Through exhibitions, educational programs, and digital archives, these institutions ensure that future generations understand the significance of the Great War. The remembrance and memorialization of World War I serve not only to honor the dead, but also to remind us of the horrors of war and the importance of striving for peace. As we visit these memorials and participate in these traditions, we are reminded of the sacrifices made by those who came before us and the responsibility we bear to build a better future. The legacy of World War I is preserved in these acts of remembrance, ensuring that the lessons of the past continue to resonate with us today. As we reflect on the war and its aftermath, we are reminded of the enduring impact of those who fought and died, and the importance of never forgetting their sacrifice. World War I reshaped the world in ways still felt today. It introduced new warfare, redrew maps, and planted the seeds for World War II. The League of Nations was formed in an attempt to prevent future conflicts, but its efforts would ultimately fall short. The sacrifices made in the trenches, on the seas, and in the skies must never be forgotten. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more historical deep dives. Until next time, remember, history is not just the past, it's the foundation of our future. Thank you for watching.